Hello friends, welcome to Cloud Pedagogy. In today's session, we are going to talk about conflict resolution as they relate to CodeCommit. But who knows, maybe we'll come out of this lesson with some general life skills. And of course, there are conflicts and we will see how do we do this with CodeCommit. We first need to understand how conflicts are introduced into a shared code repository. And then of course, we just need to understand the steps we must take in CodeCommit to resolve these conflicts. Alright, so how are conflicts introduced? Well, if we recall from the last lab, everybody was on version 2 where REST created a cptest.py file committed and pushed into the central repository. And then both Kins and Rohi did a pull and everybody is on the same page. Let's say that Rishi edits the cptest.py file, meanwhile Kins is editing the same file as well. And what happens if they are editing the same lines of the code? Well, there is going to be a conflict and it is unlikely that the changes they make are going to be exactly the same. So whose changes do we accept? So that's how conflicts are introduced and we will see how we have to resolve these conflicts. Alright, so as you will see, I am in SSH into EC2 instance as Resh. So go ahead and do that if you are following along and revisit the process in the previous lessons. So I am going to change my directory into our repo and then look for the files. Let me check the content of cptest.py file. There is our cptest.py file and remember we only have one line. So any edit is going to cause a conflict. Now of course if there were 200 lines of code, there is a good chance that there would be no conflict. Of course unless in this case Resh and Kins are going to work on the same line of code. So just edit vi cptest.py. So with Vim, let's edit our cptest.py file and I am just keeping it simple. Let me save the file. Alright, so now let's do the same as Kins. Alright, as Kins, let's go into our repo, edit our file and save as well. So we have our potential conflict here. So as Kins, let's add our changes to commit. So we do git add file name and then do the commit. So Kins wants to do a commit that will create a version 3. So let's go ahead and do that commit. So just remember we did the commit but this is still on Kins local machine. Before that, let me cache my CodeCommit user ID and password here with git CodeCommit credential helper. So this command caches credentials for use by future Git programs. The stored credentials are kept in memory of the cache daemon process instead of being returned to a file and are forgotten after a configurable timeout. Credentials are forgotten sooner if the cache daemon dies, for example if the system restarts. Okay, our credentials are set. So how do we get it to our main repository? As we have already gone with push command. There we go. We say git push origin main. Let's verify. Let's go over to the code commit in the management console. I'm going through my repo and our repo was last modified just now. While that's encouraging, right? So there we go. Alright, now let's do our commit as Resh backed SSH into Resh. So first thing she needs to do is add her changes to a commit. So let me open the file and do the changes and then save it. Next I'm going to add the file to the repo and then let's go ahead and finalize our commit. And of course we have to push to our main repository. So you may want to first integrate the remote changes usually caused by another repository pushing to the same reference. Well, of course we know what's going on. We have a conflict that is kind of verbose but it is telling us there is a conflict in a roundabout manner. We have a bunch of hints but ultimately it is telling us, hey, there is an error that failed to push. And again, we know what the problem is. We have a conflict and maybe the most important hint here is the hint is telling us to try and get pulled before pushing again. So let's do that. And remember our command, the git pull origin main. As you see here, we have the merge conflicts. How do we fix this? Alright, let's go into some conflict resolution. I'll go and open my cp test file. Wow, this is cool. CodeCommit is showing us the conflict here in Resh's version. and it is showing Kin's version really helpful. Now of course we know that the conflict is, but just think, let's say that they were editing two Python files. This would be extremely helpful. Now what's going on here is that it is the header point and this is referring to the most recent commit. And as we know, Rashes is the most recent commit and this is sort of a wall. And this is showing what is the latest accepted version on the main repository, which was Kin's pushed his commit. It was accepted. Resh pushed her to commit and there is a conflict, and that's what this is telling us. And this is a hexadecimal number. This is the commit ID and this number is specific to this commit and it will always be different for each commit. Now this is a long form. What we'll usually see is the first 7 digits. When a commit is performed successfully in response, you will see the first 7 digits. So how do we resolve this conflict? Well, let's say Resh's code is working fine and it is the perfect with the coding. And she can say to Kins saying, hey Kins, I have a conflict here is on these lines of code. So they have to work out which one of these lines of code do they want to use. And let's say they decide that they want to use Resh's lines of code. So all Resh needs to do is edit this file and just remove everything she doesn't want. She is removing Kin's edit and she is removing the helpful information, the head pointer and our wall here. So essentially telling CodeCommit, hey, this is the direction we are going with this. So let's clear the screen and say git add and then commit. Alright, so we just do our procedure again for commits. We add it back to our commit, we finalize the commit and then we push it back to the main. A much different response here. Good, it looks like it's gone through a nice process, but let's verify in the console page. Remember previously Kin's edit? So let's refresh. That's good, a success. So we have successfully gone through our conflict resolution. We have merged this conflict and everybody is happy. Rich has the latest version. We know we pushed this to our main repository. But what about Kin's? Let's go over Kin's machine. And of course, she still has that original commit that ultimately was written by Rashes due to our merging of conflicts. All Kins has to do is pull one file changed. Note that the first 7 digits of that commit ID, and let's check out the cp test.py file. Now this should be Rashes edit. So now everyone is on version 3. Our conflict has been rectified. Everyone is on the same page and ready to move forward. So that's good. Now you know how to work with merge conflict practically with our student directory application. So that's all for today's lab. Meet you again in the next session. Until then, have fun and keep learning.